Sometimes the smallest act of courage can change the fate of an entire life. On a quiet morning in Krueger National Park, a dog's instinctive leap into a raging river saved a lion cub from certain death, a moment that defied nature, science, and expectation. Stay with us as we dive into this extraordinary story of bravery, trust, and an unlikely friendship between a domestic dog and Africa's most fearsome predator. Don't forget to like, follow, and comment to share your thoughts, because you're about to witness a story that's as heart-stopping as it is inspiring. The first light of dawn stretched lazily across the Krueger National Park, tinting the horizon with streaks of orange and gold. James Harrison eased the dusty Land Rover along the familiar rutted track bordering the Sabi River, every mile of it etched into memory after 6 relentless years of study. As the senior field researcher for the Southern African Wildlife Conservation Society, James had grown accustomed to early mornings like this. The smell of dew-soaked grass, the distant calls of birds waking to greet the sun, and the soft, rhythmic panting of Scout beside him. Scout, a sleek 5-year-old black Labrador, had become more than a companion over the years. He was an indispensable partner in the field. Originally trained to track poachers, the dog's abilities had expanded to detecting wildlife, a sixth sense for danger, and an uncanny knack for interpreting the nuances of predator behavior. His specialized tracking harness, fitted with a small GPS unit and reinforced handle, reflected both his role and the high stakes of their work. James often marveled at how a creature so seemingly ordinary could hold such extraordinary talents. They rounded a bend in the track, and James slowed the vehicle, his eyes catching the fresh lion tracks crossing the dirt road. "Looks like the Sabi Pride moved through here last night, Scout," he murmured, crouching slightly to inspect the prints. The Sabi Pride had been the subject of James's research for the past 3 years. A stable group of 1 dominant male, 4 adult females, and their cubs of varying ages. Recent reports hinted that a new litter had been born roughly 8 weeks ago, but James had only managed glimpses from afar. Scout's posture shifted abruptly. Ears forward, body tense, the dog let out a low, insistent whine. James followed his gaze toward the river, initially seeing nothing but the slow-moving waters, swollen and muddy from unseasonable rains upstream. Then something small and dark bobbed in the current about 30 meters offshore. James snatched his binoculars, focusing quickly. His breath caught. "It's a lion cub," he whispered, heart tightening. The young animal, no older than 2 months, flailed desperately, its tiny head barely above water. James's mind raced, part calculating variables like a field researcher, part aching with the raw empathy of a man confronted with a life in jeopardy. The cub had probably slipped while attempting to drink at the riverbank, eroded and unstable after recent rains. Standard wildlife research protocol forbade intervention. Nature's harshness was to be observed, not altered. And yet, as James froze in indecision, Scout made that decision for them both. Before James could secure his harness, the Labrador bolted from the open window of the Land Rover. "Stop!" James shouted, voice cracking with urgency, but Scout was already plunging into the river. Powerful strokes drove him toward the struggling cub. James's hands trembled as he grabbed his satellite radio, urgently transmitting. "Base, this is Harrison at Sabi River 3. Scout has entered the water in pursuit of a drowning lion cub. Request guidance and possible backup." Static cracked through the device before a terse, fragmented response came. "Copy, Harrison. Maintain visual. No further intervention. Ranger unit dispatched." James grabbed his camera, gripping it as tightly as he did his own racing pulse. Every second mattered, and every second was an ethical minefield. Scout's strong body cut through the water with purpose, and the cub, tiny and vulnerable, struggled to keep up. Then, in a moment both terrifying and miraculous, Scout reached the cub. Rather than biting or pinning it, he positioned himself beside the struggling animal, allowing instinct and survival drive to take over. The cub, exhausted and panicked, found purchase on Scout's broad back. Weight shifted, water splashed higher, yet the Labrador's strokes remained steady, unerring, unwavering. James sprinted along the bank, lens focused, documenting every heart-stopping detail. "Come on, Scout," he muttered, a fragile blend of hope and fear threading his voice. Each movement, each ripple of water seemed to stretch time, elongating seconds into a tormenting eternity. At last, Scout reached the shallows. Feet touched the riverbed, and with careful determination he waded toward the shore. The cub clung to him, shaking but alive. James approached cautiously, camera ready. Science had recorded interspecies altruism before dolphins aiding swimmers, primates adopting orphans, but nothing matched the scene unfolding before him. A domestic dog saving a wild lion cub. Scout lay down protectively beside the cub, who, too exhausted to react defensively, remained on the damp riverbank. James's mind whirled, torn between the need to document and the imperative not to interfere further. He noted the cub's features: male, about 8 weeks old, healthy aside from the near drowning. Scout nudged him gently. A question and reassurance rolled into one. "Scout, come," James whispered softly, aware that a mother lioness could appear at any moment. Movement in the tall grass drew his attention. Lions. The Sabi Pride had arrived, likely alerted by the cub's distress calls. Scar, the dominant male, emerged first, mane dark and imposing, followed by the 4 lionesses. James froze, heart hammering against the ribcage of reality, every ounce of training screaming to remain calm and measured. The mother approached the cub, her attention singular, while the rest of the pride formed a cautious semicircle, alert but restrained. Scout rose reluctantly, remaining between James and the pride, aware of the danger but not panicked. The dog's calculated stillness contrasted sharply with the potential ferocity surrounding him. James retreated toward the Land Rover, careful to avoid sudden movements or direct eye contact with Scar. Every step measured, every breath controlled. The cub nuzzled the dog's side as if understanding some unspoken protection. What James witnessed challenged every principle he had learned in years of fieldwork. Maternal care was expressed without aggression toward Scout. The pride displayed alert assessment behavior, focused attention, not predatory hostility. Scout's protective, non-threatening presence had earned him a fragile, unprecedented acceptance. James finally reached the Land Rover, heart still pounding, lens still trained on the extraordinary tableau. The cub, trembling but alive, returned to the mother's side under Scout's watchful eye. The pride's posture gradually relaxed. Scar, the male, did not assert dominance. It was an exceptional demonstration of tolerance and assessment, a behavior that would later redefine James's understanding of predator dynamics in interspecies interaction. James exhaled, hands shaking as he secured the door of the Land Rover. Scout, finally responding to his call, trotted beside the vehicle, the weight of his heroism seemingly unnoticed by his ever-loyal gaze. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the savannah, illuminating what James would later understand as a moment both scientifically remarkable and profoundly human in its emotional resonance. For now, all he could do was sit, camera in hand, heart racing, and witness the miraculous reunion he had been fortunate enough to document. Nature had delivered both peril and wonder in equal measure, and Scout, his brilliant, impulsive companion, had rewritten the rules of interspecies trust before the world even realized it. The river churned angrily, swollen from unseasonable rains, its brown waters swirling around rocks and fallen branches. Scout paddled relentlessly, his muscles straining with each stroke, eyes fixed firmly on the tiny flailing lion cub ahead. James's breath caught in his throat as he watched, the ethical weight of the situation pressing down on him. His training demanded non-intervention, yet the dog's instinct had overridden every protocol, and now every decision rested on Scout's strong back and even stronger resolve. The cub's small limbs thrashed helplessly, its panicked cries lost in the rush of the current. James gripped his camera tightly, heart hammering with fear and awe, each shutter click capturing moments he could barely comprehend. The distance closed with agonizing slowness. Scout's broad shoulders cut through the water with remarkable power, yet the added weight of the cub made every stroke more taxing, every movement a battle against the river's relentless pull. As the Labrador approached the cub, a strange rhythm emerged. The cub instinctively clung to Scout's harness, wrapping its tiny paws around the strong fabric, finding some sense of security in the presence of this unexpected savior. Scout, understanding instinctively, adjusted his position, allowing the cub to balance atop his back without slipping into the current. James's mind raced to process what he was seeing. Here was a domestic dog trained for detection and tracking, performing an act of interspecies heroism that seemed almost impossible, even in the wild heart of Africa. The current grew stronger, tugging at both animals. James's feet sank into the soft riverbank as he ran alongside them, unable to intervene physically, but desperate to be near. He whispered encouragements, barely audible over the roar of the river. "You've got this, Scout. You've got this." The dog's head bobbed slightly in acknowledgement, ears tilted back, eyes locked on the path to safety. Each stroke carried them closer to the shallows, each kick from Scout's powerful hind legs a testament to his determination. The cub's tiny body trembled with exhaustion. Its breaths came in shallow, desperate gasps, small claws clinging to the dog's harness and fur. James could see the fear in its wide, terrified eyes. But there was also something else, a growing sense of trust, a recognition that this animal, this was its lifeline. Scout's movements became a delicate choreography, balancing the cub's weight against the river's unrelenting push. For a fleeting moment, time seemed to suspend itself, the world reduced to the cub and the treacherous water between life and death. A sudden surge of water slammed against Scout, forcing him beneath the surface briefly. James's stomach dropped. He could see the cub's head bobbing, struggling to resurface. Panic prickled at his senses, yet Scout emerged moments later, shaking off the water with determined grace, the cub still clinging tightly. Relief surged through James, though tempered by the realization that the danger was far from over. The river was no gentle stream. It was a force that respected no laws but its own. With deliberate, powerful strokes, Scout angled toward a shallower bend where rocks and sand would provide a safe footing. James ran alongside, trying to gauge the distance, every second an eternity. The cub, tiny and drenched, seemed to sense safety in proximity to the dog, moving with instinctive trust rather than fear. There was no aggression, no panic-induced biting, only the raw drive to survive, combined with the unlikely guidance of a domestic companion. Finally, Scout's paws touched the sandy riverbed. He waded carefully, body lowering as the cub shifted slightly, trying to maintain balance atop his back. James's heart thumped uncontrollably. The river had tested every ounce of Scout's strength, yet the Labrador remained steady, patient, and vigilant. As Scout reached the bank, he slowed, allowing the cub to slide gently to the ground. Its tiny body shivered uncontrollably, yet for the first time, it was free from the torrent that had threatened to sweep it away. James crouched at a safe distance, capturing each trembling movement through the telephoto lens. He could see the cub's fur matted with mud and water, small pink paws splayed, chest heaving. Scout shook vigorously, spraying droplets over the sand, then immediately returned his attention to the cub, nudging it gently with his nose, as if to ask, "Are you all right?" The cub remained still for a moment, then tentatively rose on wobbly legs, sniffing the air and glancing toward Scout, an unspoken acknowledgement of the dog's role in its survival. James felt a wave of astonishment and something deeper, a sense of witnessing something extraordinary, something that defied the rigid boundaries of both species and science. A domestic dog had not only saved a wild lion, but had done so with intelligence, patience, and compassion that seemed almost human in its discernment. He knew, as a trained researcher, that the documentation of this event would challenge the very foundations of interspecies interaction studies. Yet the morning was far from over. From the grass lining the riverbank, the rustle of movement caught James's eye. The Pride had arrived. Mothers, siblings, and the dominant male, Scar, emerged, alerted by the cub's cries, their bodies taut with concern and readiness. The tension was palpable. A single misstep could provoke aggression. One wrong movement could trigger chaos. And yet, Scout did not retreat. He remained a silent sentinel, watching, assessing, poised between instinct and training, his presence both protective and non-threatening. The mother lion approached the cub with gentle urgency, sniffing, nosing, and licking the soaked fur in maternal reassurance. Her gaze flicked to Scout, yet she displayed no signs of aggression. The other Pride members formed a cautious perimeter, scanning, alert, but not charging. Even Scar, the dominant male, maintained a careful distance, mane dark against the morning light, eyes sharp but not hostile. James's pulse raced with relief and disbelief. This was an unprecedented observation of tolerance, of measured assessment in apex predators. Scout rose slowly from his protective position, aware of the surrounding lions but remaining calm, movements deliberate to avoid triggering aggression. The cub, exhausted but alive, stayed near him, seeking security in the dog's presence. James, heart still hammering, retreated toward the Land Rover, camera still trained on the remarkable scene. Every click captured an event that might rewrite the understanding of predator dynamics and interspecies behavior. Finally, the cub huddled beside its mother, shivering but safe. Scout lay down, eyes alert yet relaxed as if his duty had been fulfilled and the balance restored. James exhaled, relief and awe mingling in a tremor he could not suppress. For a brief, fleeting moment, the natural world had bent, not broken, around an act of courage and empathy, offering a lesson in trust, instinct, and the bonds that can emerge across species. And as the Sabi Pride slowly relaxed, moving to safer ground, James noted every behavior, every subtle gesture of recognition and tolerance. Scout trotted beside him toward the Land Rover, tail wagging faintly as if unaware of the extraordinary role he had played. James knew that the implications of this morning would ripple far beyond the riverbank, for conservation, for research, and for the understanding of life in its wildest, most unpredictable forms. The sun climbed higher over the savanna, gilding the water and tall grasses. Scout shook off the remaining water one final time, eyes gleaming with alert intelligence, as though signaling readiness for whatever the world might throw at him next. James could only sit back, absorbing the enormity of what had occurred and realizing that this was not just a rescue. It was a glimpse into the profound, unpredictable, and astonishing possibilities that emerge when instinct, courage, and compassion collide. The Sabi Pride emerged from the tall grasses with silent, fluid grace, their movements almost ceremonial in precision. Scar, the dominant male, stepped forward first, his dark mane catching the morning sun, eyes scanning the scene with cautious authority. Behind him, the lionesses and the remaining cubs fanned out, forming a protective semicircle around the newly rescued cub. James froze in place, heart thundering, camera ready, but instinctively knowing that any sudden movement could provoke a charge. Scout, still panting lightly from his exertion in the river, remained poised and alert, every muscle taut yet unthreatening. His gaze met the cub's mother, and for a moment, time seemed suspended. The dog's presence had not triggered hostility, and the lioness, distinctive from her ear notch, which James had memorized over countless observations, acknowledged it with measured calm, her attention firmly on her cub. James took careful steps backward, ensuring his movements were deliberate and slow. The Land Rover, parked 20 meters behind, offered a safe retreat, but he could not afford to break the delicate balance he now witnessed. Scout, sensing the tension, rose to his feet and mirrored James's cautious movements, maintaining a protective barrier between human and cub while ensuring no sudden motion would trigger aggression. The mother lioness approached the cub, sniffing and nudging it gently, her gestures precise and reassuring. James observed through his lens, noting the subtle language of familiarity and care. The cub, still wet and trembling from its near-drowning ordeal, pressed against her side, seeking comfort in the only maternal presence it had ever known. The other Pride members maintained a careful perimeter, their postures alert but restrained, a remarkable display of discipline and assessment rather than instinctual aggression. Scar, the male lion, remained a silent observer. Historically, James knew Scar's temperament well. He had witnessed instances of territorial aggression and dominance, particularly when humans or other animals approached. Yet here, in this extraordinary moment, Scar's posture conveyed recognition, restraint, and evaluation rather than threat. His eyes flicked from Scout to the cub, reading the scene with a discernment that seemed almost analytical. The surrounding environment hummed with tension. Birds shifted nervously among the trees, the rustle of leaves punctuated by distant insect calls, and the river still murmured softly behind them. James's mind raced with the scientific implications. A domestic dog, a predator's prey, had not only survived the river's current, but had earned a tentative trust from apex predators, an occurrence unprecedented in the wild. Scout shifted slightly, lying down beside the cub in a protective posture. James exhaled, realizing that this simple act, Scout's calm vigilance, was a crucial element in maintaining the fragile peace. The cub's mother allowed this proximity, her gaze occasionally flicking toward Scout, but without any display of defensive aggression. The other lionesses adjusted their positions slightly, creating an arc of watchfulness around the scene, their bodies loose but ready to react. For James, every second was a delicate negotiation. He moved slowly toward the Land Rover, camera still trained, capturing the micro-expressions, subtle shifts in posture, and the tiny gestures of recognition that marked this moment as extraordinary. Scout's ears flicked with sound, tail flicking lightly in response to environmental cues, yet he remained a calm, stabilizing presence. The cub, exhausted and disoriented, leaned against the wall, its instincts recognizing the lifeline Scout had provided. The mother lioness leaned in closer to inspect the cub, her breath warm, nose wet, checking for injuries or stress markers. James noted the remarkable tolerance exhibited by the Sabi Pride. Here was a domestic canine, traditionally an interspecies competitor, standing between a lioness and her cub without inciting the expected territorial aggression. The pride's behavior reflected something more than instinct. It suggested alert assessment, a conscious recognition of Scout's non-threatening role. James documented each gesture, each minute movement. The cub pressed closer to Scout, nudging the dog with its small head in a silent acknowledgement. Scout responded gently, nudging back, ears forward, eyes scanning the perimeter. The balance of trust was delicate. One false move could have shattered the fragile tolerance. Yet, for now, the tableau remained undisturbed, a living testament to interspecies understanding and cautious cooperation. Scar shifted slightly, his body language signaling vigilance, not dominance. The lionesses adjusted subtly, maintaining visual awareness of Scout while keeping the cub and its mother central. James realized that the pride's coordinated behavior suggested an understanding of situational nuance. Scout was not a threat, and his calm behavior had earned the approval of the apex predators in a way that defied conventional understanding of predator-prey dynamics. James felt a mixture of awe and apprehension. This was a moment that would challenge established scientific protocols. The rescue had already violated non-intervention rules, yet the natural consequences could have been catastrophic. Instead, the cub had survived, Scout had succeeded without harm, and the pride had responded in a way that suggested cognitive evaluation and flexibility beyond standard predator behavior models. Slowly, James continued his measured retreat toward the Land Rover arm, aware that every step was a negotiation of risk. Scout trotted beside him, moving with deliberate caution, never turning his back on the pride, maintaining an unspoken boundary that preserved safety for all. The cub remained huddled near its mother, occasionally glancing toward Scout, as if ensuring the dog's presence persisted until the human had reached a safer distance. James reached the Land Rover, heart still pounding, and motioned Scout inside. The dog obeyed, eyes never leaving the pride. James secured the door, breathing heavily, and watched through the rearview mirror as the mother lioness guided the cub further into the cover of the savanna. The other pride members gradually relaxed, some sitting, some lying down, maintaining alertness without aggression. The balance had held. For a moment, James allowed himself to marvel at the scene. He had witnessed a domestic dog earning the cautious trust of apex predators, a lioness protecting her cub, a dominant male restraining his natural instincts, all under the quiet supervision of a human observer. The implications for interspecies interaction, predator cognition, and wildlife behavior research were profound. He raised his camera one final time, documenting the pride's careful retreat, the cub's subtle acknowledgement of Scout, and the fluid, almost ritualized movement of the group. Every detail mattered. The shift of ears, the flick of tails, the cub's tentative steps, Scout's patient vigilance. These were data points in an unprecedented study of trust, recognition, and interspecies tolerance, unfolding live before him in the wild African savanna. As the Sabi Pride disappeared into the tall grasses, leaving only a ripple in the river and a faint scent trail, James exhaled, feeling a rare combination of relief, exhilaration, and scientific awe. Scout trotted beside him in the land, tail wagging faintly, seemingly unaware of the magnitude of the events he had just participated in. The river, once a scene of terror, now lay quiet, reflecting the rising sun. The cub had survived, the pride had accepted, in a boundary that had seemed absolute. The division between domestic dog and wild predator had been bridged, however briefly, by courage, instinct, and trust. James sank into his seat, camera still in hand, heart pounding with the realization that what he had witnessed would challenge both science and his own understanding of nature. Scout rested his head on James's leg, panting gently, eyes bright with alert intelligence, as though satisfied with a mission completed. The Sabi Pride had vanished into the distance, leaving an indelible mark on James, on Scout, and on the scientific study of predator behavior itself. In that early morning light, the savanna felt both ordinary and extraordinary, alive with the pulse of life, the unpredictability of nature, and the rare, luminous moments where instinct, courage, and trust intersected to create something wholly unprecedented. James knew this was only the beginning, the first observation in a chain of events that would reshape his understanding of interspecies dynamics, predator cognition, and the fragile, surprising bonds that could form between the wild and the domestic. By the time James and Scout returned to the Mapani Ranger Station, the sun had climbed well above the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty courtyard. The air was already thick with the midday heat, carrying the sense of earth, vegetation, and the lingering musk of the river. Scout trotted beside the Land Rover, tail wagging lightly, completely undeterred by the exertion of the morning's rescue. James's mind, however, raced with more than just the lingering adrenaline. The weight of responsibility, scientific opportunity, and ethical complexity pressed heavily on his shoulders. Dr. Elizabeth Phillips, the research director for the Krueger Division, waited on the wooden porch of the station's main building. Her usually composed demeanor betrayed a flicker of anticipation when she saw James approaching. "James," she said, voice measured but carrying a trace of urgency. "We've been briefed on the initial report." "Scout?" She gestured toward the Labrador, who had now flopped onto the shade of the porch, panting contentedly. James nodded. "Scout here. Yes. He saved a cub from the Sabi Pride, alive, unharmed, and remarkably calm in the presence of the pride itself." Dr. Phillips' brow lifted slightly, a mixture of incredulity and scientific curiosity reflecting in her eyes. "Explain," she said, leading James into the sparse but functional office. James followed, careful to keep Scout close by. The dog's calm presence provided a grounding comfort amidst the swirling intensity of the day. Inside, the debrief began in earnest. James recounted every moment of the morning in painstaking detail: the discovery of the lion tracks, Scout's sudden alertness, the sight of the cubs struggling in the river, the dog's impulsive leap, and the perilous swim to safety. Every movement, every reaction, every nuance of behavior was cataloged. He described the cub's frantic clinging to Scout, the dog's protective positioning, and the pride's measured arrival. Dr. Phillips listened intently, occasionally nodding, occasionally interjecting with clarifying questions. "And the pride's reaction? Any aggression toward Scout?" she asked, her voice precise, reflecting the rigor demanded by scientific observation. "No," James replied, his voice steady despite the lingering tension in his chest. The mother inspected the cub leaned against Scout, and the other pride members observed without aggressive intent. Scar maintained distance, alert but calm. Their behavior was more assessment than attack. It was remarkable. The implications were profound. James's mind flashed back to the standard protocols he had followed for years. No interference, no human or domestic animal presence near sensitive wildlife, minimal disruption to natural processes. And yet, Scout had acted, and the pride had responded, not with aggression, but with cautious tolerance, an observation that would challenge fundamental assumptions about predator behavior in interspecies interaction. Dr. Phillips leaned back, her gaze sweeping over James's notes and the preliminary footage he had downloaded. "If I understand correctly," she said, carefully choosing her words, "Scout's intervention violated protocol. Yet the outcome was unprecedented. Successful rescue, no injury, and the Pride exhibited behavior that suggests recognition, or at least situational assessment." James nodded. "Exactly. And I believe there's an opportunity here to study the cognitive and behavioral implications, particularly in the cub and its mother. Their tolerance of Scout and their lack of aggression is not something I've ever documented before." The discussion quickly shifted to logistics and research implications. They reviewed the footage frame by frame, analyzing subtle gestures, the cub's tentative steps toward Scout, the mother lioness's protective but non-threatening stance, Scar's vigilant but restrained positioning. Each detail offered potential insights into predator cognition, recognition behavior, and interspecies trust, fields that had previously relied largely on controlled or artificial environments, rather than the unpredictability of true wild interaction. Dr. Phillips turned to James, her expression reflecting a mixture of caution and excitement. "Under normal circumstances, this would trigger a review of field protocols and possibly disciplinary action for allowing a domestic animal to intervene in a natural situation. But these circumstances, they are anything but normal." James exhaled slowly, his own anxiety mingling with the undeniable thrill of discovery. "Agreed. This is not just an anomaly, it's a research opportunity that we can't ignore." The conversation then expanded to observation protocols for the coming weeks. Dr. Phillips emphasized that James should maintain the regular monitoring schedule for the Sabi Pride, but with particular attention on the rescued cub. Scout's role, she suggested, should initially be limited to observation from within the vehicle, ensuring safety while allowing for continued study of the cub's responses and potential recognition behavior. "We'll need to document everything," Dr. Phillips continued, "every gesture, every vocalization, every subtle posture change. The interactions you captured today may represent the first recorded case of interspecies recognition and tolerance between a domestic dog and wild lions in a completely natural environment." James's mind raced. The potential for scientific publication, peer-reviewed studies, and groundbreaking insights was extraordinary. But so too was the challenge. Public attention would inevitably follow, particularly once the footage became known outside the ranger station. Managing this attention while preserving the natural behavior of the Pride required delicate planning. Dr. Phillips nodded toward Scout, now lying at James's feet. "This dog is remarkable. We want to include him in controlled observations, but safety is paramount. No sudden exposure to the Pride, no unplanned interactions. Everything must be documented and conducted within strict parameters." James agreed, taking careful notes and planning the next steps. Beyond the immediate rescue, the events of the morning had opened a window into the cognitive capacities of the Sabi Pride: observational learning, recognition memory, and an understanding of non-threatening interspecies actors. The research implications were staggering, potentially altering how scientists approach predator cognition studies and conservation strategies in the wild. The debrief extended for over an hour, interspersed with careful review of the telephoto footage, notes, and observations. Every behavioral detail was scrutinized: the cub's repeated glances toward Scout, the subtle postural adjustments of the lionesses, Scar's restrained vigilance. Each observation reinforced the conclusion that this was no random event. It was a complex interaction of cognition, instinct, and trust. Finally, Dr. Phillips summarized the plan moving forward. "We will continue close observation of the SEB Pride, emphasizing the rescued cub. Scout will remain involved under controlled circumstances. We will document recognition behavior, cognitive responses, and any changes in the Pride's social dynamics. This is unprecedented, James, truly remarkable, but it must be approached with care, precision, and caution." James felt a profound mixture of relief, excitement, and anticipation. Scout had not only saved a life, but had inadvertently created an entirely new field of observation. The dog's instincts, combined with James's training and careful documentation, had generated a research opportunity that few could have imagined. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the ranger station, James reflected on the delicate balance between human intervention, animal instinct, and scientific curiosity. Scout lay beside him, ears flicking as he listened to the ambient sounds of the station, completely unaware of the extraordinary role he had played. The Labrador's heroism had bridged a gap between species, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and empathy in a way that transcended conventional understanding. For James, the morning had been a profound reminder of why he had chosen this path: the pursuit of knowledge, the opportunity to witness the extraordinary within the ordinary, and the rare moments when nature revealed secrets previously thought inaccessible. Scout had created one of those moments. And now, armed with careful observation, detailed documentation, and rigorous analysis, James and his team were poised to explore the unprecedented scientific questions raised by a single, courageous act of interspecies heroism. The debrief concluded with a sense of cautious optimism. James returned to his field cabin, Scout trotting contentedly beside him, and prepared to review the morning's footage in detail. The Sabi Pride had returned to their territory, the cub safe with its mother, and yet the reverberations of what had occurred would ripple far beyond the riverbank. Science, conservation, and human understanding of the natural world had all been touched in ways that were only beginning to unfold. James settled into his cabin, recording meticulous notes, describing each movement and interaction. Scout lay nearby, eyes alert yet calm, embodying the very essence of the morning's lessons: courage, loyalty, and the profound, often unpredictable capacity for connection that could bridge even the widest gaps between species. The afternoon sun hung heavy over the savanna, casting long shadows beneath the umbrella thorn trees. James Harrison sat in the Land Rover, camera poised on his lap, notebook open, eyes scanning the Sabi Pride from the cover of the vehicle. Scout lay quietly beside him, alert yet relaxed, ears flicking at every rustle of grass or distant call of a bird. This was no ordinary observation. The morning's events had transformed what had been routine research into an unprecedented study of interspecies dynamics. The Sabi Pride was unusually visible in the open clearing, a departure from their typical behavior of seeking shade and cover. The cub that Scout had rescued, now identified as SPCE1, later nicknamed Swimmer, was the focus of James's attention. He observed as Swimmer tentatively approached his mother, mirroring normal post-drowning behaviors, but with subtle deviations. Frequent glances toward the Land Rover, and by extension, Scout, whose calm presence seemed to hold a magnetic sway over the young lion. The Pride's adult members maintained a loose semicircle, alert but non-threatening. James noted how the lionesses groomed each other intermittently, their posture relaxed yet vigilant, indicating awareness of Scout's presence without aggression. Scar, the dominant male, maintained a measured distance, occasionally flicking his tail or shifting his weight, but never approaching in a threatening manner. Each observation challenged James's prior understanding of predator cognition and territorial behavior. Swimmer's behavior drew particular interest. The cub repeatedly ventured to the edge of the Pride's formation, pausing and gazing in the direction of the vehicle. His mother followed closely, not to restrain him aggressively, but to monitor from a protective distance. James jotted meticulous notes, recognizing the cub's movements as evidence of recognition and perhaps associative memory, a capacity previously undocumented at such a young age in wild lions. Scout, meanwhile, remained an integral part of the observation. Though confined within the Land Rover, his alertness and calm demeanor appeared to influence the cub's willingness to approach and explore. James hypothesized that Swimmer's repeated glances and cautious movements suggested not just curiosity, but a form of cognitive association. Scout had become a reference point for safety. It was as if the cub, through a combination of instinct and experience, understood the dog's role in its survival. James's observations extended beyond Swimmer. He noted subtle behavioral shifts among the Pride. The lionesses showed increased attentiveness, occasionally pausing grooming or repositioning themselves to maintain visual contact with the vehicle. Scar remained composed yet vigilant, an embodiment of restrained dominance that James interpreted as situational awareness rather than habitual territorial enforcement. The patterns were consistent across multiple observation sessions, providing a wealth of data on predator cognition, recognition, and tolerance. As the hours passed, James captured frame after frame, documenting every nuance: the flick of an ear, the tilt of a head, the cub's hesitant steps toward the vehicle, and Scout's alert but non-threatening stance. Even minor movements held significance. Swimmer's mother, for instance, occasionally nudged her cub back toward the Pride when he ventured too close to the vehicle, balancing protection with allowance, a behavior that James interpreted as measured social teaching rather than instinctive aggression. James also noted environmental factors that could influence behavior: the heat of the afternoon sun, the presence of distant herds, and the subtle scents carried by the wind all contributed to the Pride's vigilance. Yet despite these variables, the interactions remained remarkably consistent: tolerance, measured observation, and the cub's recurring engagement with Scout. Each observation strengthened the hypothesis that the cub recognized the dog, associated him with survival, and perhaps even trusted his presence. To enhance data collection, James employed both visual and audio equipment. Long-range microphones captured vocalizations beyond the threshold of human hearing, while high-resolution cameras documented microexpressions and posture shifts. The combination of qualitative and quantitative data provided unprecedented insight into predator cognition, interspecies recognition, and potential learning behaviors in wild lions. James meticulously recorded his findings in his field journal, separating objective observations from speculative interpretations, ensuring scientific rigor despite the emotional resonance of the events. By late afternoon, a subtle change in the Pride's dynamics became evident. Swimmer engaged in playful stalking behavior, practicing techniques on small insects and leaves, yet periodically paused to glance towards Scout and the vehicle. The mother lioness tolerated this behavior, supervising without overt interference. James observed that the cub's willingness to explore while maintaining awareness of Scout suggested a form of behavioral plasticity, adapting behavior based on novel experiences rather than rigid instinct. Scout's presence within the vehicle provided a controlled variable. Though the dog did not interact directly, his calm vigilance appeared to reassure the cub, permitting exploration and social engagement with the Pride. James reflected on the significance. This might represent one of the first documented cases of a wild predator displaying observable behavioral changes in response to a domestic animal it had learned to associate with safety. The implications for predator cognition, interspecies dynamics, and wildlife conservation were profound. As shadows lengthened, James continued to document every interaction. Swimmer and his siblings engaged in normal play, practicing stalking and mock hunting, yet Swimmer's glances toward the Land Rover persisted. The lionesses adjusted positions, occasionally grooming each other while maintaining visual awareness of the vehicle, suggesting a nuanced understanding of risk, safety, and tolerance. Scar's posture remained relaxed but attentive, a steady reminder of the dominance hierarchy that governed the Pride. James's meticulous notes captured behavioral subtleties that could otherwise be lost. Swimmer's mother nudged him gently toward the Pride when he lingered near the vehicle. The cub responded with a subtle pause rather than resistance, and Scout's attentive posture remained constant, reinforcing the cub's perception of safety. These details provided a compelling case for observational learning, associative memory, and interspecies recognition in a natural, uncontrolled environment, a scenario rarely available to researchers in the wild. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, casting long golden rays across the savanna, James concluded the observation session. The Pride slowly began moving toward a nearby hunting ground, adults leading, cubs following. Swimmer occasionally glanced backward, as if reluctant to leave the relative safety and familiarity of Scout's presence. James felt a profound mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The morning's rescue had opened a research avenue that promised to reshape understanding of predator behavior and cognition. Upon returning to his cabin, James reviewed the footage and field notes. Scout, still alert and composed, lay at his side, providing a steady anchor amid the excitement and complexity of the day. James reflected on the significance of what he had documented: behavioral plasticity, maternal trust, predator cognition, and the unusual persistent recognition of Scout by swimmer. Each observation reinforced the potential for new insights into interspecies interactions in wild environments. James realized that the day's observations had implications beyond pure science. The findings could inform conservation strategies, influence wildlife management, and shape understanding of predator-prey dynamics. The trust exhibited by the cub and measured tolerance of the pride demonstrated that interspecies interactions were more flexible and context-dependent than previously recognized. As darkness began to fall over the savanna, James prepared his final notes for the evening, carefully separating empirical observation from interpretive speculation. Scout, eyes half closed but still alert, exuded a calm confidence that mirrored the morning's heroism. The day had provided not only unprecedented scientific data, but also a reminder of the profound, often unexpected ways animals could interact, communicate, and influence one another across species boundaries. James glanced out at the savanna, the silhouettes of acacia trees etched against the fading light. Swimmer and the pride were now beyond sight, yet their behavior would remain central to his research for months to come. The delicate balance observed, trust, recognition, and careful social interaction would become the foundation for a series of studies examining cognition, social learning, and interspecies dynamics. Scout had not only saved a life, he had opened a door into an entirely new understanding of animal behavior. As night fell, James recorded his final voice notes for the day, capturing every nuance of the pride's behavior, the cub's responses, and Scout's role in shaping the interactions. The data would later contribute to peer-reviewed studies, but for now, the significance was immediate and visceral. He had witnessed a wild predator adapt behaviorally, influenced by an entirely different species, in a natural, uncontrolled environment. Scout lay quietly at his feet, a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the potential for interspecies understanding. The day had demonstrated that observation, patience, and careful documentation could reveal behaviors that challenged traditional assumptions. As James closed his journal and reviewed the last images, he understood that this was more than science. It was a testament to trust, connection, and the remarkable, unpredictable intelligence of the animal world. The morning air carried an unusual tension, a mixture of anticipation and the hum of activity at the Mapani Ranger Station. Overnight, the events of the previous day had begun to ripple far beyond the boundaries of the Krueger National Park. Tourists and guides whispered about what had occurred near the Sabi River. But it wasn't the word of mouth that had caused the stir. It was a grainy video captured by a tourist vehicle, showing the black Labrador, Scout, plunging into the river to save the struggling lion cub. Within hours, the footage had gone viral. James received urgent messages from Dr. Phillips and the station's communications team. Requests were coming in from every corner of the globe. Journalists seeking interviews, documentary filmmakers requesting exclusive footage, and social media posts accumulating millions of views. The seemingly simple act of a dog rescuing a lion cub had captured hearts worldwide, turning a routine research observation into a viral phenomenon overnight. While the international attention thrilled some, James felt a gnawing sense of responsibility. The viral nature of the video meant that park management faced an entirely new set of challenges. Tourists arriving in greater numbers, many unaware of the delicate behavior patterns of the Sabi Pride. The safety of both visitors and wildlife now hung in precarious balance, and James knew that careful planning and strict protocols would be essential to prevent disruption. Even more intriguing from a research standpoint were the reports from overnight ranger patrols. The Sabi Pride had shifted its position, moving closer to the river crossing where the rescue had occurred. This was highly unusual. Lions rarely abandon their established resting territories without a compelling reason, suggesting that the rescue incident and the presence of Scout had influenced their behavior in subtle but measurable ways. James realized that the morning's study would need to incorporate these changes, carefully documenting not just immediate reactions, but the potential long-term cognitive and social consequences. By mid-morning, James was preparing the Land Rover for an extraordinary observation session. Scout, sensing the anticipation, sat alert in the passenger seat, ears pricked forward, eyes scanning the landscape with characteristic vigilance. The morning mist still clung to the savanna, painting everything in soft gray tones. James felt the weight of the task ahead, documenting a pride of apex predators in altered behavioral patterns, influenced in part by a domestic dog that had already become a global sensation. As they approached the usual observation route near the Sabi River, the pride came into view. They were not hidden among the brush or resting beneath trees as James would have expected. Instead, all 8 members were positioned along the main track, fully visible and unusually stationary. Scout's reaction confirmed the anomaly. The Labrador, typically alert to predators or unfamiliar scents, remained calm, his attention focused entirely on the rescued cub. Swimmer, the Cub Scout had saved, glanced toward the Land Rover repeatedly, demonstrating deliberate recognition behavior rather than simple curiosity. James's pulse quickened as he radioed the observations to base. Harrison to base, Sabi Pride located at coordinates S24.98, E31.54. Fully exposed, atypical positioning, all members present, requesting permission to extend observation beyond standard protocol. The reply came quickly. Permission granted. Dr. Phillips and Dr. Naidu were en route from Johannesburg, equipped with specialized monitoring devices for a detailed study of cognition and recognition. Within hours, the research team arrived in 2 vehicles, bringing thermal cameras, long-range microphones, and recording equipment capable of capturing even the subtlest behavioral cues. Dr. Ayandanda Naidu, a leading expert in predator cognition, approached James with barely contained excitement. "This is unprecedented," she said, scanning the pride with meticulous care. The positioning, the calm demeanor, the focused attention of the cub, these behaviors are clearly intentional, not coincidental. The team quickly established observation protocols, ensuring minimal disturbance while maximizing the potential for data collection. Scout remained in the vehicle, visible but restrained by a harness, ready for any necessary withdrawal if the pride displayed stress or aggression. Swimmer, once again the center of attention, began to display a series of behaviors that would be meticulously documented, approaching the vehicle cautiously, pausing to observe Scout, and returning to the safety of his mother's side only when reassured. Throughout the morning, James and the team documented every micro-movement, the cub's tentative steps toward the Land Rover, the mother lioness's measured supervision, the lioness's subtle vigilance, and Scar's restrained dominance. Each action was recorded, analyzed, and noted for potential cognitive significance. The pride's tolerance of Scout, combined with the cub's recognition, represented a behavioral phenomenon that defied conventional expectations of predator response in the wild. The viral video, meanwhile, continued to spread globally. Requests for interviews poured in, and social media platforms buzzed with speculation and admiration. The story of Scout's heroism had captured the public imagination, but James knew that the real scientific story, the pride's cognitive response and interspecies recognition, was far more nuanced. It required patience, observation, and careful analysis to ensure that data integrity was not compromised by sensationalism. Despite the global attention, the team remained focused. Long-range thermal cameras captured eye movements and subtle body language, while microphones recorded low-frequency vocalizations often imperceptible to humans. Every gesture, tilt of the head, and shift in posture was scrutinized. The cub's repeated approach toward Scout, combined with the mother's careful supervision, suggested not only recognition, but a form of learning and adaptation, a potential first documented case of interspecies memory influencing behavior in a wild apex predator. By mid-afternoon, patterns began to emerge. Swimmer and his mother maintained proximity to the vehicle, while the other pride members positioned themselves strategically, balancing vigilance with relaxed observation. The cub's behavior demonstrated an awareness of Scout as a non-threatening entity, possibly linked to the dog's role in its survival. James documented each interaction with precision, noting how the cub's focused attention and measured exploration indicated cognitive engagement rather than mere instinctual curiosity. The team conducted controlled tests to assess recognition responses. Scout was made visible in the Land Rover's open window, ensuring complete safety while allowing the cub to see him from a distance. The reaction was immediate. Swimmer broke from the pride formation, approaching the vehicle confidently but cautiously. The mother lioness followed, maintaining protective proximity without restricting the cub's movement. The interactions were recorded from multiple angles, providing a wealth of data for analysis of cognitive, recognition, and trust behavior. By the end of the day, James realized that the morning's events and the pride's unusually exposed positioning offered a window into behaviors rarely, if ever, observed in wild lions. The combination of Scout's heroic intervention, swimmer's recognition, and the pride's tolerance created an unprecedented research opportunity. The viral video had captured the public imagination, but the detailed observations revealed a deeper, scientifically significant narrative: the potential for interspecies cognition, recognition, memory, and behavioral adaptation in wild apex predators. As dusk settled over the savannah, James and Scout returned to the ranger station, both physically exhausted and mentally invigorated. The viral fame of the rescue was undeniable, but the scientific implications were even more profound. Scout's actions had not only saved a life, but had catalyzed a chain of events that could reshape understanding of predator cognition, interspecies recognition, and the subtle complexities of animal behavior in the wild. James watched Scout settle into his bed at the station, tail twitching lightly, ears flicking at distant noises. The dog's heroic morning had transcended instinct, revealing a depth of awareness and trust rarely attributed to domestic animals in wild interactions. James felt a deep sense of purpose, knowing that the observations and data collected would challenge long-held assumptions, inform conservation strategies, and inspire both scientific and public audiences worldwide. The morning air was crisp and still as James Harrison drove the Land Rover toward the Sabi Pride's territory. Scout sat in the passenger seat, alert, his gaze sweeping across the savannah. The events of the past days had transformed a routine observation into an unprecedented experiment in interspecies recognition. Today, James and the research team would attempt something unconventional, a controlled test to see if the rescued cub, Swimmer, could recognize Scout from a safe distance. Dr. Iandanda Naidu had arrived early with her team from Johannesburg University, their vehicles brimming with specialized monitoring equipment, thermal cameras for eye tracking, sensitive microphones for capturing vocalizations beyond human hearing, and high-resolution lenses for documenting micro-expressions. Every precaution had been taken to ensure the safety of the Pride, Scout, and the human observers. The challenge lay in the delicate balance of proximity, visibility, and behavioral interpretation. The Land Rover rolled slowly into position approximately 50 meters from the Pride. James kept Scout secured with a specialized harness, ensuring he could be quickly withdrawn if necessary. Scout's body language was calm but alert, ears forward, muscles relaxed yet ready for immediate action. James observed that the dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Though he had no prior training for this specific interaction, Scout's intuition guided him, providing a model of calm reassurance for Swimmer. The Pride remained largely stationary, an unusual choice for early morning activity. Swimmer, once again at the edge of the formation, paused frequently to glance toward the Land Rover. The mother lioness monitored him carefully, positioning herself in a protective arc but allowing a degree of independence. James noted that her tolerance suggested a level of cognitive judgment that had rarely been documented in field studies. When the team signaled that everything was ready, James slowly allowed Scout to move forward in the open passenger window, fully visible to the lions. The dog remained calm, tail low, eyes focused on the cub without any aggressive or playful gestures. The tension in the savannah was palpable. Every researcher's gaze was trained on Swimmer, measuring micro-responses, shifts in posture, and the potential for recognition behavior. At first, the cub remained hesitant, glancing back at his mother for reassurance. Then, with deliberate caution, Swimmer stepped forward, pausing mid-stride to observe Scout. His movements were careful, calculated, and clearly intentional rather than random. The mother lioness followed, maintaining protective proximity without interfering, signaling a measured assessment of the situation. James could feel his pulse quicken. This was the moment that could provide unprecedented evidence of interspecies recognition. Thermal cameras tracked the cub's eye movements, confirming that he was actively observing Scout and following his position with sustained attention. The mother lioness occasionally nudged him, guiding him closer but always allowing the cub to maintain agency in the interaction. James noted how the cub mirrored Scout's posture in subtle ways, pausing, sitting on his hunches, tilting his head, indicative of potential behavioral mirroring and observational learning. For nearly 3 minutes, Swimmer remained at a deliberate distance, maintaining visual contact with Scout, while occasionally shifting his weight or stepping closer. The lionesses observed quietly, their alertness a careful balance of vigilance and tolerance. Scar, the dominant male, remained a measured presence, eyes scanning the landscape without asserting dominance or aggression. The subtle coordination among the pride suggested that they were aware of the unusual nature of this encounter, but trusted their instincts to allow the interaction to proceed safely. James and Dr. Naidu's team recorded every micro-behavior. The cub's posture, tail movement, ear flicks, and gaze direction were meticulously documented. The mother's protective but permissive behavior was noted as an extraordinary display of trust, indicating that she recognized Scout's role in her cub's survival. These behaviors suggested not only recognition, but potentially a rudimentary understanding of beneficial interspecies interaction, a phenomenon scarcely recorded in wild apex predators. Scout remained perfectly still throughout, his body language modeling calmness and non-aggression. James observed that the beast seemed aware of the cub's intentions, maintaining a gentle but firm presence that allowed the lion to explore without threat. The subtle synchronization between the two species, one wild, one domestic, was nothing short of extraordinary. After several moments, the cub finally sat on his hunches, maintaining eye contact with Scout, a posture that mirrored the dog's own alert yet calm stance. The mother lioness observed, vocalizing softly in what James interpreted as reassurance. Swimmer's deliberate engagement, combined with maternal supervision and Scout's non-threatening presence, demonstrated the potential for recognition memory, a cognitive awareness of a specific individual across species boundaries. The team conducted multiple controlled trials, varying the distance, angle, and visibility of Scout to assess the cub's responses. Each time, Swimmer exhibited recognition behavior, approaching cautiously, pausing to observe, and returning to his mother only when reassured. The patterns were consistent, demonstrating not random curiosity, but a deliberate, repeatable behavior, indicative of advanced cognitive processing in a young lion. James documented every moment in his field journal, noting the clear distinction between instinctual response and learned recognition. Observational learning, trust, and the cub's ability to interpret the intentions of a different species were all present. The implications were staggering. Here was evidence that a wild predator could retain memory and exhibit adaptive behavior based on prior interspecies interaction, a field rarely studied in natural environments. The mother lioness eventually signaled Swimmer to rejoin the pride, and he complied reluctantly, glancing back once more toward Scout before moving away. The rest of the pride maintained their positions, alert but not aggressive, as if acknowledging that this encounter had altered the social landscape in subtle but meaningful ways. James and Dr. Naidu exchanged glances, both fully aware of the rarity and significance of what they had just documented. By late afternoon, the team concluded the controlled observation. The Sabi Pride gradually moved back toward their natural resting area, Swimmer remaining integrated with his siblings, while the mother guided him gently. Scout returned to his usual seat in the Land Rover, calm and seemingly unbothered, though James knew that the dog's presence had been pivotal to the morning's success. James reviewed the footage immediately, capturing every nuance: the cub's measured approach, the mother's tolerance, the pride's coordinated vigilance, and Scout's role in facilitating recognition. The data provided a foundation for the first confirmed case of interspecies recognition and trust behavior between a domestic dog and wild lions in a natural setting. These observations would form the cornerstone of future studies on predator cognition, recognition memory, and interspecies behavioral dynamics. As dusk fell, James reflected on the extraordinary day. Scout had not only rescued a life, but had become an unwitting participant in groundbreaking scientific research. The carefully controlled recognition experiment had confirmed what James had suspected. Swimmer remembered Scout, associated him with survival, and demonstrated deliberate, intentional behavior in response. This interaction was more than chance. It was a profound example of cognitive flexibility and interspecies understanding. Scout rested his head on James's knee, ears flicking at the distant calls of birds and hyenas, unaware of the magnitude of the findings he had helped generate. The Sabi Pride disappeared into the savannah, their behavior providing evidence of a level of cognitive sophistication that challenged long-held assumptions about apex predators. James knew the implications extended beyond his own research, potentially influencing conservation strategies, predator management, and the understanding of animal intelligence in natural settings. The controlled recognition experiment concluded not with a dramatic finale, but with subtle, profound evidence. A young lion, having survived near drowning, exhibited clear recognition and trust toward the very dog that had saved him. This was a moment of quiet triumph, both scientific and emotional, that James would carry with him for the rest of his career. The Sabi Pride's territory had long been established along the Sabi River. Yet in the weeks following Scout's dramatic intervention, subtle changes emerged that captured James Harrison's keen scientific attention. Morning patrols, once routine, now revealed patterns that challenged conventional assumptions about predator behavior, social hierarchy, and cognitive awareness. The rescued cub swimmer had survived the river incident, but it was his behavior in the weeks afterward that became the focal point of study. James's observations revealed a cub displaying remarkable consistency in behavior towards Scout. Though Scout remained confined to the Land Rover during initial observation sessions, Swimmer repeatedly positioned himself to maintain visual contact with the dog, approaching cautiously but with unmistakable recognition. These interactions were documented in meticulous field notes, with James noting every step, glance, and pause in behavior. It was clear that the cub's responses were not random. They reflected memory, trust, and adaptive learning, an observation previously undocumented in wild lions interacting with non-predatory domestic animals. The mother lioness played a crucial role in moderating these interactions. She allowed Swimmer to venture closer to the vehicle, following the cub without interference but maintaining a protective presence. Her tolerance, which persisted over multiple observation periods, suggested an exceptional degree of cognitive assessment, a willingness to accept the dog's presence as non-threatening, and an apparent acknowledgement of Scout's role in her cub's survival. James realized that this behavior challenged fundamental notions of maternal instinct in wild predators, revealing an intricate balance between protective vigilance and adaptive social learning. Throughout this period, the pride's overall behavior exhibited subtle but significant deviations from prior patterns. The adult lionesses frequently repositioned themselves to maintain visual access to Scout, while Scar, the dominant male, remained a measured presence, vigilant but non-aggressive. These patterns were recorded consistently across days and weeks, suggesting that the pride had integrated the knowledge of Scout's presence into their situational awareness without perceiving him as a threat. James extended his observations beyond simple proximity behaviors. He noted changes in social dynamics among the cubs, particularly Swimmer's increased confidence in approaching both the vehicle and areas of partial exposure within the savannah. Swimmer would often stop at a calculated distance, sit on his hunches, and observe Scout while intermittently glancing back at his mother for confirmation. The subtle interplay between curiosity, recognition, and maternal guidance indicated an early form of cognitive mapping, a recognition that extended across species boundaries. To capture more detailed behavioral data, James coordinated with Dr. Naidu and her research team from Johannesburg University. Using long-range thermal imaging, the team tracked eye movements and subtle postural adjustments in Swimmer and other pride members, while high-sensitivity audio equipment recorded vocalizations beyond the range of human perception. This non-invasive methodology allowed the researchers to quantify recognition responses, stress indicators, and social engagement without disrupting the pride's natural behavior. The data collected was remarkable. Swimmer displayed repeated recognition behaviors toward Scout in controlled observation sessions, while his mother maintained a protective yet permissive posture. Other pride members demonstrated awareness without active engagement, suggesting recognition of the unusual circumstances, but not the same level of specific focus. These findings provided the first documented evidence of selective interspecies recognition and memory in wild lions, expanding the understanding of cognitive flexibility in apex predators. The research team observed not only visual recognition, but also subtle vocalizations from the cub and maternal responses. Swimmer occasionally emitted soft, repetitive sounds directed toward the vehicle, and his mother responded with gentle vocal cues, reinforcing his proximity behavior. These vocal exchanges appeared to function as a system of reassurance, a behavioral adaptation ensuring safety while permitting controlled exploration. The interplay of auditory and visual recognition added a new layer of understanding to the cognitive abilities of the pride. Over time, James observed that Swimmer's recognition behavior persisted, even when Scout was not actively visible. The cub demonstrated anticipatory responses, positioning himself to maintain potential sightlines and exhibiting behaviors consistent with memory-based recognition. This persistence suggested that the interaction with Scout had created a lasting cognitive imprint, an ability to retain awareness of an individual across temporal and species boundaries. The team's findings also informed broader conservation strategies. The observed behaviors indicated that predator cognition and interspecies recognition could be more complex than previously assumed, providing insights into risk assessment, social learning, and potential applications for mitigating human-wildlife conflict. By documenting this rare interspecies bond, researchers could better understand how wild predators process novel stimuli, make decisions, and adapt to unexpected events. James continued to integrate the observations into peer-reviewed studies. The documentation included detailed behavioral logs, annotated photographs, and video analysis. He carefully distinguished between empirical evidence and interpretive conclusions, ensuring that the extraordinary nature of the interactions was grounded in scientific rigor. The findings contributed to a growing body of knowledge about predator intelligence, social cognition, and interspecies dynamics in natural environments, offering a foundation for future research. The pride's long-term adaptation was also evident in subtle shifts in daily routines. Swimmer appeared more confident in foraging, play, and social interactions with siblings, while maintaining occasional awareness of Scout's potential presence. The mother lioness demonstrated enhanced flexibility in monitoring her cub, balancing protective oversight with allowance for independent exploration. These adaptive behaviors suggested a nuanced understanding of environmental risk and safety cues, mediated in part by the prior interaction with Scout. James documented each phase meticulously. Daily observation sessions tracked behavioral persistence, noting how recognition memory influenced cub activity, maternal supervision, and pride dynamics. The repeated patterns provided evidence of cognitive consistency, a measure that reinforced the hypothesis that interspecies recognition and memory could persist over time in wild apex predators. Public interest, fueled by the viral video, presented additional challenges. Increased visitation to the park required careful management to protect the pride from unnecessary disturbance. James and the park staff implemented controlled observation points, ensuring safe distance while allowing continued documentation of the interspecies interaction. Fees from these specialized permits were allocated to conservation and anti-poaching initiatives, creating a positive outcome from an otherwise unpredictable situation. Scout continued his role as both companion and observational anchor. During regular patrols, the dog's behavior reflected a subtle shift. He appeared more attentive to lion scents, more alert to potential pride movement, yet remained calm and non-aggressive. James interpreted this as an adaptive awareness, a behavioral calibration based on prior experience with the pride. Scout's natural abilities continued to enhance research outcomes, providing both a data and a practical model for future conservation detection dog programs. Months of observation confirmed that the initial recognition behaviors gradually diminished in overt intensity, but persisted intermittently, suggesting a long-term memory component rather than a temporary response. Swimmer remained integrated with the pride, displaying normal social development and predator behavior, while selective recognition responses toward Scout provided compelling evidence of persistent interspecies awareness. James reflected on the implications. The rescue incident had transformed not only the cub's life, but also the understanding of predator cognition and interspecies dynamics. The data would inform conservation strategies, predator management, and educational programs, demonstrating the potential for nuanced behavioral adaptation in wild lions when exposed to extraordinary circumstances. As the sun set over the savanna, casting long shadows across the familiar terrain, James recorded his final field notes. Scout lay at his side, content yet vigilant, a symbol of the extraordinary bond that had initiated this long-term study. The Pride remained in their territory, thriving and displaying normal social cohesion, yet their behavior towards Scout and Swimmer's recognition would continue to shape scientific understanding for years to come. The long-term observations had revealed something profound. Wild predators possess the cognitive flexibility to recognize and respond selectively to individuals from entirely different species, mediated through experience, survival, and trust. Scout's impulsive act of bravery had created a ripple of discovery that would redefine aspects of predator cognition and interspecies dynamics, leaving a legacy for both science and conservation. The golden hues of the African sunset stretched across the savanna, bathing the landscape in a soft, warm glow that seemed to reflect the extraordinary events of the past year. James Harrison sat on the porch of his modest field cabin, outboat lying comfortably at his feet, tail occasionally flicking as the last light of day filtered through the trees. The Sabi Pride's distant roars echoed faintly across the landscape, a reminder of the wild, untamed lives continuing just beyond the boundaries of his observation. For James, this evening offered a rare moment of reflection, a chance to absorb not only the scientific discoveries but also the profound emotional resonance of what had unfolded. Scout had become more than a companion or research assistant. He was a bridge between worlds. A domestic Labrador trained for detection and conservation had leapt into the Sabi River on impulse, saving a life and catalyzing a cascade of events that challenged long-held assumptions about predator cognition, interspecies recognition, and social learning in wild animals. Swimmer, the Cub Scout had rescued, had survived and thrived, developing into a healthy sub-adult lion with normal integration into the Pride. Yet, the subtle recognition behaviors persisted, evidence of memory and awareness that transcended species boundaries. James's mind wandered back over the past year. From the first encounter at the river to the viral dissemination of the footage worldwide, the events had attracted attention from scientists, media, and conservationists alike. Requests for interviews, research collaboration, and documentary footage had poured in from across the globe. While managing public interest was a challenge, it also provided opportunities to educate people about wildlife, predator behavior, and the importance of ethical observation. Scout's actions had created a narrative that was both emotionally compelling and scientifically revolutionary. Field observations had continued methodically. James had maintained detailed logs, documenting every nuance of the Sabi Pride's behavior. Swimmer's recognition of Scout was not a constant, overt action, but rather a subtle, persistent phenomenon. Occasionally, the cub would glance toward the vehicle when Scout was present, exhibiting behaviors consistent with memory and recognition rather than mere curiosity. These interactions reinforced the hypothesis that wild predators were capable of selective interspecies recognition and that memory could persist over extended periods even without repeated reinforcement. The mother lioness remained a central figure in these observations. Her tolerance of Swimmer's exploratory behavior, combined with her measured oversight, had demonstrated adaptive maternal intelligence. She allowed controlled engagement with the environment while ensuring the cub's safety, highlighting a sophisticated balance between instinctive protection and cognitive flexibility. James noted that her behavior, influenced indirectly by Scout's initial intervention, illustrated the potential for nuanced learning within predator social structures. Scout's continued presence during observation sessions contributed to a rare, controlled opportunity to study interspecies dynamics. Unlike other domestic animals introduced into research environments, Scout had already established a meaningful, context-specific relationship with the cub. The dog's calm, attentive, and non-threatening demeanor reinforced Swimmer's comfort, allowing the cub to engage in natural behaviors without fear. This created a unique experimental condition, a domestic species influencing wild predator behavior under carefully monitored, yet naturalistic, circumstances. Over time, these interactions had measurable effects. Swimmer exhibited increasing confidence in exploration, hunting simulations, and social engagement with siblings, yet still retained occasional, deliberate acknowledgement of Scout. This suggested that cognitive processes, including memory, recognition, and adaptive behavioral modulation, were operating at a level more sophisticated than previously documented in wild lions. James carefully quantified these behaviors, noting patterns, frequencies, and contexts, building a data set of unprecedented depth and reliability. The broader pride, too, demonstrated remarkable tolerance. Lionesses adjusted their positions to maintain awareness of Scout without compromising social cohesion or predatory instincts. Scar remained vigilant but restrained, illustrating a capacity for situational assessment rarely observed outside controlled studies. James interpreted these findings as evidence of cognitive flexibility and an emergent understanding of the non-threatening presence of a previously unknown species. The implications for predator cognition, interspecies trust, and adaptive behavior were profound. Internationally, the research gained recognition. The viral video had catalyzed public interest, drawing attention to conservation challenges, wildlife research, and ethical management of interactions between humans, domestic animals, and wild species. Funding opportunities followed, allowing expanded observation programs, technological enhancements, and support for anti-poaching initiatives. Scout's role in this ecosystem extended beyond heroism. He became a model for conservation detection programs, illustrating how domestic animal, when trained and deployed responsibly, could contribute meaningfully to wildlife research. Reflecting on the year, James acknowledged that the most significant outcomes were not the publications or awards that emerged from the work. Rather, they were the profound lessons in connection, trust, and the permeability of boundaries between species. The morning of Scout's rescue had demonstrated that instinct, courage, and empathy could bridge the artificial divisions imposed by humans in biology, revealing possibilities for coexistence and understanding that defied conventional categories. The cabin was quiet now, the savanna settling into the deep hush of night. The distant calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of small mammals, and the occasional low roar of Scar punctuated the stillness. James watched Scout, who had finally curled into a restful position, his breathing steady and content. The dog had followed his instincts with no thought of recognition or reward, yet the consequences had been far-reaching, both scientifically and emotionally. James opened his field journal, reflecting on the cumulative data. Swimmer's behavior, the pride's adaptive responses, and Scout's calm influence provided an extraordinary case study of interspecies recognition, cognitive flexibility, and behavioral plasticity in wild apex predators. The persistence of recognition behavior over months, even as the cub matured and engaged more fully in pride life, suggested memory retention and selective awareness that had previously been underestimated in wild lions. The narrative extended beyond science into ethical reflection. The interaction highlighted the delicate balance between intervention and observation, the responsibilities of human researchers, and the potential for domestic animals to play constructive roles in wildlife research. Scout's behavior had challenged protocols, but the outcomes provided a wealth of insight that would inform conservation practices, observational strategies, and public understanding of wildlife interactions for years to come. In the final moments of twilight, James allowed himself a quiet sense of satisfaction. The Sabi Pride thrived, Swimmer had grown into a capable young lion, and Scout continued to demonstrate loyalty, intelligence, and courage. The viral attention had been both a challenge and an opportunity, allowing the story to educate, inspire, and inform an international audience about the importance of conservation, careful observation, and respect for natural processes. As darkness settled fully, James closed his journal and leaned back, the African sky unfolding in a tapestry of stars above. Scout's steady presence at his feet reminded him that this story, one of bravery, trust, and interspecies connection, was not merely a scientific triumph, but a testament to the extraordinary potential of empathy and instinct across boundaries. The cub, the pride, and the wush were all players in a delicate, interconnected world, one that humans could observe, learn from, and occasionally respectfully influence. For James, the legacy was clear. Scout's leap into the river had created far-reaching consequences, groundbreaking scientific insights, educational opportunities, and a profound demonstration of the bonds that can form when trust, courage, and intelligence intersect. The Sabi Pride continued its natural life, integrated, thriving, and occasionally acknowledging the presence of the truth that had once changed the course of a cub's life. As Scout finally drifted into sleep, James made his final entry for the day in his field journal. The Sabi Pride maintained normal behavioral patterns with swimmer fully integrated. Recognition behaviors persisted intermittently, suggesting long-term memory, and interspecies dynamics demonstrated remarkable flexibility in natural settings. He paused, reflecting that the most enduring lesson of all was not scientific but philosophical, that boundaries between species, though necessary for safety, are permeable when courage and empathy intervene. With a deep sigh, James whispered softly to Scout, "You've done more than save a life, my friend. You've changed the way we understand the wild." The night settled around them, the sounds of the savannah, a gentle reminder of the wild, untamed world they both served to protect, observe, and respect.